Hi guys. So for my first case, I'm going to do Emma Fillipoff. It is a missing persons case that is pretty well known, but in spite of it being done so many times, it's fascinating to me. So there's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now because there's so many intriguing elements to this case. I just want to get right into it. And you're going to see that with most of my videos. I'm going to jump right in because I hate it. It's a pet peeve of mine when people rattle on before, like I'm doing right now. So from now on, I'm probably just going to jump right into the case. Okay? So Emma Fillipoff went missing November 28th, 2012. She was 26 years old at the time. So let me tell you a little bit about Emma. She's multifaceted. She's a free spirit, artistic, a bit of a dreamer. She really draws people in, and she's drawn to different types of people. And being that way myself, I can relate to that. She likes artists and just thinkers, and she's kind of an introvert at times, but also really well liked and laughs a lot. Very attractive. She's got very long hair, or she did at the time she went missing. Brown hair, sometimes with blonde streaks in it. She is a chameleon in her appearance. She's really able to change her look. You'll see her with a ponytail or a bun or a cap with braids, or sometimes just hair flowing. And she also changes her hair color. She will dress sometimes kind of slouchy in camo pants and sometimes wears dresses. She doesn't have any piercings or tattoos, although she has had her ears pierced in the past. She's got a tan complexion. She's 90 to 110 pounds, 5'5". She visits the library almost daily. She's a reader and she's a writer and an artist. She frequents coffee shops, and you'll see her writing frequently in coffee shops. And she's a private person. She doesn't appreciate invasive questions. And we'll see this in her relationships with people that we will talk about. She can come off as shy, but is also super friendly. She loves animals and children. She befriends unusual people, like we talked about. Her father has said that her trusting nature can sometimes get her into trouble, as she tends to do what a lot of young girls do and trust the wrong people. I think that's a lesson that we have to learn in life. I know I certainly went through a similar phase myself when I was young. She's a total nonconformist. She didn't care for social media or to have a cell phone. She went barefoot often, and probably more times than not when she is seen, she is barefoot. And she didn't like to spend money. That will also come up later in this case. She's not a confrontational person. She's very passive, and I think that goes back to what her dad said about just not wanting to stir up any trouble and just befriending people that maybe took advantage, and out of being non-confrontational, she just went along with it in some cases. She was introverted and a thinker and would keep to herself lots. So if something was bothering her, I think she just didn't say it. So she grew up in Perth, Ontario, and she was one of 4 kids. She had 2 brothers and a sister. Her mom was a school teacher. Her dad was an artist, a painter, and I think she inherited a bit of both of her parents, but mainly from her dad. She was kind of the same artistic spirit as him. And she moved. In the fall of 2011, she wanted to branch out on her own and do her own thing. And she moved to Victoria, British Columbia, which is not a very big city. It's kind of small, rather. And in the fall of 2011, she packed up and left. She got rid of a lot of her belongings before she went, gave it away or sold or threw away things. And she didn't want to plan anything. She said she would figure it out when she got there. In fact, she told a friend that she thought great things were going to happen when she got there. So she was really excited about moving. And while she was still in Perth, right around the time she was going to leave, she met and befriended a guy named Julien Huard. Now, his name is spelt Huard, but he's French, and I could be completely butchering it, and I apologize if you're French and I completely don't know how to say this, but she was still in Perth and about to leave, and she was at an art, kind of one of those little street fairs, and she was a photographer as well, and she was selling some of her art. She caught this guy's eye. This guy approached her at her booth and I think kind of pretended to be interested in her art, but he was more interested in this beautiful young girl. And so he and she began a little bit of, I guess, a courtship, but it was very casual. At least on her part, she believed it to be just a little, maybe a step above a friendship. And the reason I say that is because they did spend time together. And Emma may have liked him a bit, but she wasn't a planner. And she would tell him this, that she knew she wanted to move and she didn't think it was a good idea to get into a serious relationship while she was in Perth. She told him she'd be moving and he accepted it, but yet still continued to call and still continued to email. And so at one point, she asked him not to call anymore. However, he did call again. And this time, I guess either he said the right thing or she was feeling generous. And she let him down easy. And she said she was sorry that it wasn't him. She just, wasn't ready for that. She was going to move. She was going to be in a whole different, really all the way across the country. If I tell you how far away it is, it'll make more sense. So Perth is almost, if you're in the United States, think of Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, that area. And then think of picking up and moving all the way to New York City and how that's a cross-country move. This was similar. It was, I believe, a 45-hour car drive. So she was moving far away. And that may have been the reason, coupled with maybe she just wasn't as much into him as he was into her. But he was clearly very into her, and I think she knew it. And so she did him a solid, and she put her big girl panties on, and she went to his home and broke it off with him face to face. And she told him, no hard feelings, no love lost, basically. And I think that really helped him and gave him a little bit of closure that he needed. And so he was able to deal with it a little bit better. So anyway, now he says he was cool with it then and he had accepted it. And so she moved. Fall of 2011. She was 25 years old. She didn't know anyone. She didn't have any plans. She did have a childhood friend that was there. And that's where she went when she first arrived. She stayed with her childhood friend and her friend's partner. And she stayed there for a few months before getting a small unit in the same building of her own. But she was a mover and a shaker, and she didn't stay there long. She got a job. She was a barista for a very short time. That job didn't last very well. After a few months, she began living kind of a transient lifestyle. You'll see it referred to as a transient lifestyle in most of the blogs or most of the stories about her. So basically, transient lifestyle means she kind of lived with the flow. Let me tell you some of the places that she lived. So she would stay with random friends on couches and what have you. She would stay at the Hotel 760. She also cleaned rooms there, I guess, to maybe earn her keep a little. She stayed on boats. Now, it's unclear if they were houseboats or just simply boats. She did have lots of friends down on the pier, so maybe they offered her a night on the boat, sometimes. She would sleep in the woods alone, which creeps the hell out of me. But she was brave like that, and her friends would say that she was brave. She would even sleep in a tree. I would fall right out of the tree. If you guys saw how I sleep, I wouldn't last 10 minutes in a tree. But anyway, plus my back and my neck, I can't even imagine. One night in the floor of the wood, first of all, that's not ever going to happen, but if I slept one night on the ground, I would have a backache and a migraine for a week. But I digress. So from February to November of 2012, she would stay at a woman's shelter, and this was called the Sandy Merriman Shelter for Women. So they had kind of a deal there where you could stay there for a month, but then you had to be gone, and after a month you could come back. So she would stay there a month, be gone 30 days, sleeping on boats in the woods, and then she would come back to the shelter for another month. Now, she didn't care for co-ed shelters, but she would stay at this shelter because it was only women. She was also a chef. She had gone to culinary school in 2008 and 9, and she got a seasonal job at Redfish Bluefish. And I have eaten at a Redfish Bluefish locally in my area where I live, but I did not know that it was seasonal. Now, maybe it was seasonal then and now it's not, or maybe just this particular job was seasonal. That's unclear. But she had a job until October 31st, so for a few months, and then was expected to return in February of 2013. So Emma's family was unaware that she was living in a shelter. Her mom had no idea. When the Sandy Merriman would come up on the caller ID, her mom just assumed that was a friend named Sandy Merriman that she was staying with, or maybe her roommate. Again, she was 25 years old, so her parents didn't pry too much into her life. They would hear from her on occasion via email, what her mom would call cryptic emails. And she'd call occasionally on holidays, but it was mainly emails, and her mom would describe them as poetic or cryptic, and it's not surprising to me because she was a natural writer. She kept several journals, and she also had a blog, and she was just one of those artistic people that had a lot going on up here. And so she wrote down a lot of beautiful, kind of mysterious things that were kind of like, I think what her mother means when she says cryptic is they could mean one thing, but they could mean another thing, and used a lot of metaphor, and you weren't sure, was she sad when she wrote this or just introspective? So she did write a lot of beautiful things. She made many friends in Victoria. She spent time with boat owners down at the harbor. She befriended many artist types, many in the homeless community. So she's walking one day, and who does she happen to bump into? But Julian from Perth. Now, Julian says that he moved to Perth. This was 14 months after she had moved there. So she was really shocked, to say the least, to bump into someone who had basically been an acquaintance from across the country. So I think in the moment she was a little taken aback, but at the same time didn't have time for it to really sink in. So Julian says that she was surprised and happy at first to see him, as I can imagine she would be, to see a strange face there. It's like, wow. And then I think maybe when she stepped away from him, she thought for a second, whoa, that's a far way for him to move. And He swears that it had nothing to do with Emma, and he's very convincing. But I think most people that look at it think it's a little bit weird. It would be like me living in Seattle and then moving to, not even New York, because New York's a commonplace big city. But maybe I moved to a tiny little town in Rhode Island and run into this person from Seattle. And I think that, maybe she thought that was a little strange, because he also bumped into her a few more times, and she didn't give him the same warm response. In fact, the first time that he bumped into her, he said, "Hey, do you want to catch up? Do you want to grab something to eat and talk?" And she said, "You know that I don't like to make plans." And she didn't like to make plans, but most of us women know that if we really want to see somebody, we're going to figure out a plan and a way to do it. So I think she just wasn't as into him as he was into her, is what it boils down to. But nonetheless, he did bump into her a few more times, and she was a little standoffish after. And, that was that. And he did see her the day of her disappearance, but we will get into that later. So friends say that in the summer of 2012, Emma was leaning towards a cleaner lifestyle. She had given up sugar and coffee and drinking and cigarettes. And she was a vegan. She was trying to drink lots of water. Now, she was starting to lose a lot of weight at this time, and her friends say she began distancing herself at this time as well. The summer is when they started to notice a few things that were different. So she was showing some signs of paranoia. So she was showing some signs of paranoia and fear. So that summer, Emma bought a van, and she wanted to use it to just travel across the island and live in it. And she was very excited. And I actually think it was a cool van, too. It's a Mazda MPV1, if I'm saying it right. Yes. And it's a 4-wheel drive. It was red. It's kind of a cool little van. It was something that I probably would have driven when I was young. But she had the intention of wanting to also live in her van and to just drive it wherever she wanted. And the storage guy even recalls that when she came to move her things, that she was so pumped to get her stuff into this van. And that's just how she was. She wanted the freedom of moving around, and I think that van represented freedom to her. The only problem is she had so much trouble out of it that it ended up being, I think, more harm than good. And she had to have it towed 3 times. And she also was constantly looking for a mechanic to work on it. So it ended up being more just for storing her things than it did for her to get around in. Now, in mid-November of 2012, which is just a couple of weeks before she went missing, she told several different people about different plans that she had. And she was a little flighty, and you never knew what she was going to plan next. And she told people she was leaving Victoria to Salt Spring Island. She told someone Tofino, BC, British Columbia. She told friends she would be going to sail on a boat to Mexico, that she would be traveling to Japan with her father. She would head to San Juan with a man that she barely knew, or that she would go live off the grid in the woods somewhere. She also told a few different people that she would be moving back to Perth suddenly. So I don't think she was lying when she said any of these. I think she just changed her mind a lot and changed, her settings a lot, and couldn't really decide what she wanted to do some days. So none of these are necessarily untrue. She just was a bit flighty and changed her ideas. So when Emma began to show signs of mental health issues, her friends became alarmed. When she first arrived in Victoria, the childhood friend that she was staying with started to see signs of something she could only describe it as compulsion or obsessive kinds of behaviors. She would take feathers and rocks and shells and even pieces of food and arrange them in obsessive manner. And she would also insist that other people participate in this, and that made her roommate kind of alarmed. As it would me, I think. I think I'd freak out a little bit, but also, Emma was outside one night, and her roommate awoke to hear Emma outside, as she puts it, quote, high on the grass and stars. She called her dad James, it's Emma's dad. So James called Emma and offered to send her a plane ticket to come home. And Emma was very angry. She said she could handle herself and she was an adult and did not want to come home. Now, as James and Shelley, Emma's mom, were divorced by this time, James did not inform Shelley of this call. And Shelley says now, in hindsight, she wishes James would have informed her. She would have totally come and gotten her, or at least gone to visit and investigated further. So 3 different friends in Victoria said that Emma was stressed over feeling harassed by someone that she had a bad experience with during culinary school, which was in 2008 and 2009. She never gave the identity of this person, and the identity is not listed in any of her many journals. But a roommate recalls that she avoided social situations where she had to interact with men, and that goes back to her never staying in co-ed shelters. I think she was a little standoffish maybe after that experience, which there isn't much detail about what the bad experience was, but you can fill in the blanks. I mean, she either had some kind of, well, I don't want to speculate. So, by early November, a dramatic personality change has happened. She started canceling trips last minute. She seemed scared to go anywhere except for the pier or the shelter, and those were the only 2 places that she was comfortable. In mid-November, again 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, a friend saw Emma outside the shelter looking cold and wet. So this friend just happened to be driving by and sees her soaking wet and freezing. And she's standing motionless, staring at a lot of birds that are gathered up on the sidewalk. Around this same time, shelter staff and residents are noticing that she's keeping her curtains drawn. She's keeping her curtains drawn so often that they're almost never open. She began to move a lot of her furniture to the curb. Now, I say her furniture. It actually belonged to the shelter. So the shelter staff says to her, you can't move this furniture out, this is ours. And so they move it back in, and then she moves it further. She takes furniture out of her room and starts to put it across the street on the other side of the street. And a staff member approaches her and says, why are you doing this? Why are you getting rid of this? She says that the furniture has been talking to her and she doesn't like what it's saying to her, and it won't stop talking. And so I think the staff started paying closer attention to her at that point, that there was clearly a sign of mental illness or some type of psychosis going on. So the staff was alarmed when Emma began selling and giving away her items. Now, we saw this behavior in Perth before she was moving, but at that time I think it was kind of a normal thing because she was getting ready to move. So people give away their items and sell them when they're going to move. I know I have. But this time it was different because the staff at places like this are trained to look for specific behaviors. And one sign of suicidal behavior is getting rid of all of your belongings. And so, because of privacy laws, with Emma being an adult, the staff could not contact her parents. However, they did contact the Victoria Police Department, and they asked them to come and do a mental health check. The police did not come to do a mental health check. Instead, they asked them to please call back if she continued any of these behaviors. So the staff didn't call back. They were probably thought that nothing would happen anyway, and that's just my speculation. That's all I have to say on that. But a concerned roommate saw Emma's behavior, and she suggested to her that perhaps she should go get a membership at the YMCA. And while she suggested that, she suggested that Emma should call her mother. Well, it must have sunk in, because beginning the night of November 23rd, Emma did start a series of calls to her mother. And these calls were sad for her mother because Emma cried and said she wanted to come home. But like all mothers would, and I know I would if it were my daughter, she said, "I'm going to bring you home." Well, 4 nights in a row, Emma called, and the next day, without fail, she would call and change her mind. And she would say, "Never mind, Mom. I'm okay. I'm going to handle this on my own. I'm going to stay where I am." And this happened 4 times. During one of these calls, Emma told Shelley that she didn't know how she could face her. And this leads a lot of people to speculate that Emma was on drugs. In fact, lots of Emma's behaviors have led the public to speculate that Emma was on drugs. And even from the outside looking into me, that's one of the questions I had. The only thing that stumps me about that is that Emma had a bank account with almost $3,000 in it. Knowing enough about what I know about drug addiction, drug addicts don't just hold on to money. And I know this from experience, but also it's just common sense. She never spent money. I mean, very rarely did she. She spent it for necessity. And drug addicts don't do that. She would have had an empty bank account, and, this is all my opinion, of course. And I believe, if I had to guess, of course, I'm no psychiatrist by any means, but if I had to guess, I think it was more of mental illness. In fact, Shelley, her mother, was really worried about that because there was a history of mental illness in the family. And some people with mental illness do tend to self-medicate, and they use drugs to do that. But there has never been any account of Emma using drugs, and I just want to say that. But anyway, a lot of people think when they hear that she said she couldn't face her mother, that they think it was because she was on heroin, or, that would explain why one day she would want her mom to come save her, and then the next day she chickened out because she couldn't score her drugs. And that would make sense, except for the $3,000 that sat untouched in the bank. I don't see it. So, the final call was on November 28th, and that was the day that she went missing. So Shelley was planning to come for her that day, and she got a text early in the morning at 4:30 that said, "Don't come, Mom, not today." But she was concerned. Something in her voice that day just freaked her out. It's a mother's intuition. And so she took a flight that afternoon, the first flight she could get. Now, according to witnesses, Emma returned to the shelter about 6 p.m. that night, and the staff told her mom was on her way, and she stormed out. Shelley didn't tell him she was coming, though, so it's still unknown how the shelter came to know about her visit, because family members had advised Shelley to just leave Emma alone and let her live her life and let her handle her own problems. And I think up to a point she listened to that. But then when she heard something in her daughter's voice, she just said, I don't care what anyone says. I'm going to check on my little girl. So she arrived at the shelter around 11 p.m. and she was told that Emma didn't claim her bed that night. You know, with these places, you have a certain curfew that you have to be there by, or you won't be able to sleep there. And she never came. Shortly after midnight, staff called the police and filed a missing persons report on Emma Fillipoff. So, I'm going to go through a brief timeline on the day of disappearance just to get kind of a clearer picture of what happened that day. We know at 4:30 she texted her mom not to come, right? Well, at 8:23 a.m., Emma is seen on video in a 7-Eleven. She uses her debit card to purchase a $200 prepaid card, like a regular $200 credit card. She is carrying several bags on her shoulder, and she nervously peers out of the glass door and lingers there as if watching for someone. And there's a video of this. I'll try to link to it if I can find a specific link to that video. But if I can't link to it, you can find it on several websites. Just Google it. She is peering out almost like she's either waiting for a ride or she is trying to hide from someone. She kind of steps away and then goes back to it. And you'll just have to see it to see what I mean. So at 10 a.m., while riding the bus, Julian, her ex or her old friend from Perth, sees Emma on Pandora Street. So he gets off a few stops early to talk to her. Well, when he steps off the bus, he notices he can see her from the back, and she is standing right at the corner of the sidewalk, about a step away from being in the street. Well, he's right near one of the errands he needs to run. He had to register for a health card. So he says, well, she's turned around. I'm going to go in and get this health card right quick. So he goes in and gets it. And he comes out to find Emma still outside, but she's standing motionless on the corner. So he steps in front of her and he peers into her hoodie that she's wearing, and he asks her if she needs help. And she slowly nods her head no. And Julian will say that this in his mind was the moment when he thought, well, I'm done with Emma. She doesn't want to accept my help. She clearly doesn't want anything to do with me. I'm just done with her. So later, when she goes missing, he will say that he saw her on the 27th, which is the day before she went missing. However, the good team at Web Sleuths, you know, the online community of armchair detectives, they called him on his shit, and they tracked his Facebook, and there was some discrepancy in his Facebook postings that he couldn't have seen her on the 27th, and so he later recants his statement and says, yes, in fact, he must have seen her on the 28th, which was the morning of the day she went missing. So, around noon, Emma visits the library, as she did every day. It was nearly a daily occurrence for her to visit the library, so nothing strange there. In the afternoon, 2 people report seeing Emma walk back and forth looking lost. They immediately call the police, who took a report, but it's unknown if they followed up. So no one knows if they actually came to look for Emma after the report was filed, or if they actually did speak to Emma. That so little is known on the police's side. They don't release much information. But that was the first 911 call that day. So between 4 and 6 p.m., Emma is sighted just kind of shuffling about, and she's in the street. The person that saw Emma had actually seen her twice. They saw her shuffling around, and then they later in their car and they see her again to their surprise, and she turns and gives them a really sad smile. They want to help her, but they don't know how she's going to take their help or if she'll be offended. So they instead go to the police department and report the sighting, but the police did not follow up. They didn't take a report. They didn't, I don't know. 5:54 p.m., Emma goes back to the same 7-Eleven where she had purchased the $200 prepaid card. And this time, she purchases a prepaid cell phone. She again lingers at the door, same exact behavior that you saw at the early morning visit. And so then at 6 p.m., which is 6 minutes later, she goes back to the shelter. Now this is when she gets to the shelter and they are telling her that her mother's coming, and she is pissed off. She storms out. A staff member tries to go after her but can't find her. She's gone. 10 minutes later at 6:10, ABC Taxi picks her up near the shelter. She tells them she wants to go to the airport. So they're driving just a short distance, and she asks them how much. She asks the driver, how much is this going to cost? And the driver tells her $60. Now the airport's about 30 minutes away, so that sounds about right. But she tells them she doesn't have money. She can't afford the fare, which so many people think that's strange because she did have money. But then again, she was very frugal, and she did not really like to spend money. Now, was she going to the airport to flee, or was she going to the airport to meet her mother that she knew was coming? Did she really have the money and didn't mind spending it, but maybe she got cold feet and didn't want to go meet her mom? There's so many reasons why she could have made him stop, and she could have just used the money for an excuse, which is kind of how I'm leaning. I think that she wanted a reason to cut the drive short, and that was just her excuse. But anyway, so she asked to be dropped off in the same place, which is the shelter. So when they get back to the shelter, just a short ways, she asks the driver if she can sit in the car with him a while. And he tells her, sure, you can sit here until I get a call. Then I got to go, make money because this is my job. And she agrees. Well, she's sitting there and he begins to play the radio. And he gets a few calls too. And she says some strange things. So she's asking him, why is that sound coming out of the radio? And she's acting strangely paranoid about the words that are coming out. And it's just a really strange interaction. And he can tell something's not right. And so I think the radio scares her to the degree where she pays really quickly and then hops out before he can even turn around. She's out of the vehicle and she takes off. So that was at 6:10. 5 minutes later at 6:15, she is spotted by an acquaintance named Dennis Quaid, not to be confused with Dennis Quaid. I wish I could run into Dennis Quaid, but so she's barefoot on the corner and disoriented. And when Dennis sees her, he gets the impression that she's unable to cross the street. She's so frozen, and she's looking all around as though she's paranoid. And so he naturally asks her, is someone following you? Are you all right? And she asks him to walk with her for a few minutes. Well, while they're walking, I guess she's starting to get annoyed by his questions. He's only trying to help, but it's ticking her off a little. And so she continues the walk by herself. She wants to be left alone. So once this happens, he ducks into a restaurant and he calls the police again. So he calls them at 7. So the police get there at 7:17 and they locate her, and she's clutching her shoes by the Empress Hotel. So they talk to her for about 45 minutes. When her friend Dennis Quaid sees the police talking to her, he thinks, okay, she's cool, she's all right, and he takes off about his business. So it was almost 30 minutes before Emma would speak to the police. And when she did, it was in one-word answers or by nodding or shaking her head. So she also refused to put her shoes back on. She told them that she was planning to meet with a friend and that she was just going for a walk. And they asked her if she was a danger to herself or others. She said no. And they let her go, and they watched her walk away at 8 p.m. And that was the last time that anyone has seen Emma. So last confirmed sighting anyway. So Shelley, the mother, has requested to get a transcript of exactly what happened. She filed what's called a Freedom of Information request, and it was denied without reason. So we will never really know exactly what went on during that time. But she was never seen again, except for some sightings have definitely come through from the public. And we'll go over that as well. So here are the sightings that I guess are notable, because there are hundreds of sightings of Emma. So December 2nd at the Inner Harbor after dark, there's a couple, and a woman approaches them. They say that it was Emma, according to her photographs and things, and she tells them to remember the name Emma Fillipoff, and she tells them to please repeat it back 3 times. So that was kind of an unusual and strange request, but we do know Emma to make strange requests or to say strange things, so who knows, really. And then on December 5th at 11:17 a.m., the $200 prepaid card is found. It's used at a convenience store to purchase cigarettes. Well, they tracked down the person that had used the card, and it was a homeless man who was an alcoholic. And he says that there is a kind of a general area where he found the card, but he can't be exactly sure because he's an alcoholic and he blacks out a lot. And he took a polygraph. The police cleared him as a suspect because they believe that he genuinely did just find the card and use it. But who knows? We really don't know. Anyone could be a suspect, or maybe there are no suspects. Maybe foul play is not even a part of this. That's what's so intriguing about this particular case. All right. So, December 5th, 2 days later, Julian becomes a person of interest when Emma's parents find odd Facebook messages hidden in the other folder. And they also find a message that he sent Emma weeks after she vanished, offering to build her a cabin in the woods. So that's kind of bizarre and strange, and so many things about this guy are weird, but he is French, and some of the things he says get lost in translation. For example, he had emailed Emma's dad saying, I just want to talk to her. I don't want to stalk her like I did before. And that alarmed a lot of people. He later attributed it to poor translation, and it's a slang a lot of the kids use. If you call somebody more than 3 times in a week, they'll say, don't stalk me. I don't think he technically meant hiding in the bushes, with binoculars or what have you. Now, fast forward to May of 2014, and there are posters of Emma everywhere. This is a couple of years after, a year and a half after. And a guy in a green shirt walks into a boutique, and he has a crumpled poster which he has pulled off of the door of the boutique, and he comes into the boutique worker and says, this is my girlfriend, and she doesn't want to be found, and she wants to be left alone, and she's not missing, she just doesn't want anyone messing with her, and you need to leave her alone, pretty much. Well, there's a video of this guy, and police are still to this day trying to figure out who he is. He has an obvious limp, or he did at the moment. We don't know if it was a temporary limp or if it's just a full-time limp. And he has dark hair. And so the family really would love for anyone to come forward if they can recognize this man, especially if you live in the area. Oh, one more thing. He has flame tattoos on his arms. So, all right. So that is the case of Emma Fillipoff. Now, I wondered if I should do a whole section dedicated to theories and things like that. And I might do that on other videos. But for this one, there are just so many possibilities. You know, what I want to hear is what you all think. So much of my time has been spent not only researching the case itself, but what I really scroll through is the comments on these videos, because I want to hear some other people's insight as to what the hell they think happened to this girl. They have checked the harbor. They've checked all in the water in case she jumped in the water. She has not been found. They have, and you know, bodies float, and they feel like if she was in the water, her body would have been found so quickly. She was also spotted once. I didn't mention this in the sightings, but there is a picture of her that she was seen at a coffee shop, and her parents were even saying that is her. And when you look at the picture of her, it is her. Like it's her face. It looks just like her. And she's in a coffee shop and she's writing. So, I mean, it seems like it's her. And they put that picture out to the public, and a woman actually came forward and said, "This is me." And she just happened to look like Emma. So, yeah, that one really had her parents, you know, in a frenzy thinking they had found her. And it's a possibility that Emma just wants to be anonymous and that she took off somewhere. It's a possibility that she now is on drugs trying to self-medicate now that she's got this mental illness issue, and maybe she is living in a homeless population somewhere that she is just nameless and faceless and blended in under a bridge somewhere. There are so many possibilities here. I think this is one where I almost always, my brain goes to foul play, but for some reason with this one, I just really feel like she's alive somewhere, that she is out there, and that's what makes this different, and that's what makes this so intriguing. So, I'm obsessed with reading comments about what other people think. So, comment what you think. I seriously want to know. Let's crack this case, okay? Let's solve it. I plan to do these videos. I didn't want to do them on my ASMR channel because some people aren't into that, and they didn't come there for that, and I don't want to do a bait and switch. They think they're coming there to go to sleep, and I'm putting gruesome rape and murder in their face, you know. So I wanted to do it on this channel and then invite you all, if you want to watch it. Now, since I know so many of you like to use that kind of subject matter to go to sleep to, I'm trying to keep my voice kind of a soft-spoken. Now, on occasion, I might get a little loud if I'm particularly passionate about something. And I'm not going to any great lengths to block out the sound. Like if you hear a car go by or a motorcycle, I'm not going to edit that out. So I'm not going to treat it like an ASMR video, but I'm still going to talk low enough where you could use it for that if you wanted to. Hope that makes sense. All right. I can't wait to read your comments. This is one that I'm going to obsess over the comments and read. I mean, I'm probably going to be like that with all the true crimes that I do, because I want to talk to people about it so much, and my husband's just not into it. He doesn't get it. And I really want to talk with people who are like-minded, who are so deep into this that they want to know what the hell happened. And I love y'all and all that. I haven't been keeping up with my weight videos, and that's because of just the medicines I've been on, guys. It's a lost cause to try to guide you all and lead you all when I'm in such a period of so many changes and trying to figure out what diet I'm going to be on, what medicines I'm going to be on. And so it's going to be a few weeks of getting all of that sorted out before I can honestly come to you from a place of honesty and give you meal advice and all of that. I got to figure it out first. So I plan to still do that though, because I want us to all do it together. But let me get my shit together first. All right. Love y'all. And I will see you on the next video.